My name is Avery Bennett. I'm 32 years old, a high school graduate, and I built a $10 million company from scratch. Without a degree, without connections, just pure grit. Today I live in Austin, Texas, running one of the fastest growing marketing agencies in the region. But a few months ago, at a dinner table covered in fine china and passive-aggressive smiles, I was called uneducated trash by my own mother-in-law. That night changed everything. We were at the Reynolds estate in Lakeside Heights. My husband Lucas's family had gathered to celebrate his sister Hannah landing her dream job at a top design firm. I had dressed carefully for the occasion. Sleek black dress, pearl earrings, the kind of look even Vivian Reynolds couldn't criticize, or so I thought. Dinner started out polite, even pleasant. Lucas was proudly sharing updates about my company, Narrative Edge, how we'd expanded across 4 states, how we were featured in Marketing Innovator Weekly. But I saw it, the twitch in Vivian's cheek, the tightening of her grip on her wine glass. Then she dropped the bomb. "It's just surprising," she said with that condescending smile, "how far one can get these days without a proper education. Instagram fame, I suppose, isn't the same as a real business." Lucas's face went pale. I stayed calm. But she wasn't done. "You know, Lucas," she added, her voice louder now, "I always hoped you'd marry someone with class, education, someone who could give you a real future. Instead, you settled for this." Silence. Choking, heavy silence. Lucas stood. I just looked her dead in the eye and realized I had spent 7 years trying to earn approval I never needed. That night I stopped trying to fit in and started choosing myself. And that decision, it changed my entire life. I wasn't born into wealth or prestige. I didn't grow up with college counselors or summer vacations or trust funds. I grew up in Oak Ridge, Michigan, a place so small you could drive through it in 5 minutes, blink, and miss it completely. It's the kind of town where everybody knows each other and nobody expects much to change. But even in a town full of familiar faces and quiet routines, I knew I was different. I was raised in a 2-bedroom house on the edge of town, next to the railroad tracks. The siding on our home was faded, our porch creaked when you stepped on it, and in winter, the cold seemed to find its way through every crack. My room wasn't really a room, it was half storage closet, half sleeping space. I slept beside boxes of old Christmas decorations and my mom's cleaning supplies. But to me, that little corner of the house was home. My parents, Scott and Melanie Bennett, were the hardest working people I've ever known. My dad worked days at the local factory, operating heavy machinery that left his hands calloused and stained. At night, he drove for a regional courier company, delivering packages until midnight. My mom cleaned houses during the week and waited tables on the weekends at a greasy spoon off Route 9. Their schedules were relentless, but they never complained. And somehow they always made time for me. They taught me the value of showing up, even when you're tired, even when nobody's watching. My mom used to say, "We may not have much, but we've got pride in what we do," and that stuck with me. Watching them hustle day in and day out wasn't just inspiring, it was a silent promise that I carried into adulthood, that I would build a life where they wouldn't have to work this hard forever. We didn't have new clothes every school year. Most of mine came from the thrift store or church donation bins. I learned early how to make hand-me-downs look stylish. I got creative, cutting old jeans into shorts, sewing patches on jackets, learning to iron everything just right. Kids at school didn't always understand, and sometimes they whispered behind my back. But I learned how to carry myself with confidence, even when my backpack had a broken zipper and my shoes were a season out of date. Despite everything, my parents never let me feel ashamed of where we came from. When the electricity got shut off for a few days, we treated it like an adventure, lit candles, told stories, huddled under extra blankets. When we had pasta for the 3rd night in a row, my dad would say, "We're doing a taste test of all the sauces in the pantry." They turned struggle into survival. and survival into strength. By the time I was 13, I started looking for ways to help, babysitting for neighbors, walking dogs, raking leaves. I saved every dollar I could. I wasn't just saving for things I wanted, I was saving for a future I hadn't yet defined, but desperately believed in. Then came the bracelets. I was 15 when I made my first beaded bracelet. Honestly, it wasn't even that good, but I wore it to school and a girl in my biology class asked where I bought it. When I told her I made it, she said, "You should sell those." That one comment flipped a switch in my brain. I borrowed a few bucks from my mom, walked to the dollar store, and bought elastic thread and a pack of assorted beads. I spent hours at the kitchen table making designs, figuring out what worked. Soon, I was selling bracelets for $3 a piece. I'd sit on the bleachers during lunch, a small plastic box on my lap, showing off my designs. Kids actually bought them, sometimes two at a time. I reinvested every dime into more materials, experimented with colors, packaging, even made a hand-drawn logo. I wasn't just making jewelry, I was building something. I didn't know it yet, but I was learning business fundamentals: supply, demand, customer service, reinvestment. That feeling of earning my own money, of creating something from nothing, was electric. It gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't found anywhere else. I wasn't just the poor girl from the wrong side of town anymore. I was an entrepreneur, a hustler, someone who could take control of her own story. That small business didn't make me rich. At best, I cleared maybe $200 a month, but what it gave me was far more valuable: belief. Belief that I could dream bigger, that even if I didn't take the traditional path, college, internships, corporate ladders, I could still carve my own way forward. Looking back, those early years shaped every part of who I am today. The grit, the resourcefulness, the hunger to succeed, they weren't taught in classrooms. They were forged in real life, in late-night shifts, overdue bills, and makeshift workstations on folding tables. That's the thing about growing up with less. You either learn to accept your limits, or you learn to defy them. I chose defiance, I chose hustle, I chose to believe that where I started didn't have to dictate where I'd end up. And while I live in Texas now, running a thriving agency, flying to pitch meetings, building a life I once only imagined, I've never forgotten the girl in Oak Ridge who made bracelets to afford her own school supplies. She's still here, whispering in my ear every time I walk into a boardroom full of Ivy League suits, reminding me that my worth was never tied to a diploma or a zip code. It was born in that two-bedroom house next to the railroad tracks, and it's the reason I'll never stop pushing forward. The first time I held a $5 bill that I earned myself, I felt something shift inside me. I was 15, sitting on a cracked plastic chair outside the Oak Ridge High School gym. A girl named Shelby handed me the bill in exchange for a beaded bracelet I'd made the night before. It was simple, turquoise and silver, a little charm dangling at the center. Nothing fancy, but the way she smiled when she slipped it onto her wrist, that smile was everything. I had created something with my hands, my vision, and someone wanted it. That $5 wasn't just money, it was proof. I started small, with supplies from the local craft store: elastic thread, beads, clasps, and a pair of scissors I borrowed from my mom's kitchen drawer. My first inventory fit into a reused shoebox. I carried it everywhere, to school, to babysitting gigs, to the diner where my mom worked. During lunch breaks, I'd lay everything out on a napkin, display style, right there on the cafeteria bench. To my surprise, people kept buying. At first, it was the girls I knew from class, then their friends, then people I'd never spoken to before. I realized pretty quickly it wasn't just the bracelets, it was the story. The idea that someone like me with nothing but thread and grit could make something beautiful. Within a few weeks, I had regulars. People would message me on MySpace, yes, MySpace, asking for custom colors or initials. I started offering collections themed by season or school spirit. I even got a tiny banner printed at the local print shop that read Avery's Originals, which I proudly taped to my shoebox-turned-jewelry cart. I was making around $60 a week. Not much by adult standards, but for a teenager from a paycheck-to-paycheck family, it felt like I had hit gold. I wasn't asking my parents for lunch money anymore. I was buying my own school supplies, even pitching in for groceries once or twice when things got tight. But more than anything, I felt independent, capable. Like I had discovered a secret no one else knew, that I didn't have to wait for permission to succeed. There was one day I'll never forget. A Saturday morning in October, the fall air crisp enough to see your breath. I set up a small table outside the football stadium during a home game. I had made about 40 bracelets in school colors, green and gold. I borrowed a folding table from a neighbor and used an old bedsheet for a tablecloth. I stood there in a coat 2 sizes too big, hoping someone would stop. By halftime, I was sold out. That night, I counted $112 in cash, more money than I'd ever held at one time. I hid it in a shoebox under my bed, and for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future where I wasn't just surviving, but thriving. Of course, not everyone saw it that way. There were whispers. Why's she always trying to sell something? She thinks she's better than us now? It hurt, but I kept going. I knew the life I wanted wouldn't be handed to me. I had to build it, one bracelet, $1 at a time. Around that time, our family car broke down. My dad was furious. We couldn't afford a new one, and his delivery shifts were at risk. I went to my room, pulled out $180 I'd saved, and gave it to him. He cried. That moment became a turning point, not just for me, but for how my family saw me. I wasn't just their teenage daughter anymore. I was a contributor, a partner, a builder. The bracelet business eventually slowed down, as all things do. Trends shifted, and honestly, I outgrew it. But it laid the foundation for everything that came next. It taught me supply and demand, customer service, branding. I didn't know those terms back then, but I lived them, and it sparked something deeper, an addiction almost, to creating value out of thin air. I love the process, the dreaming, the building, the moment of truth when someone said, "Yes, I'll buy that." I began to wonder, what if this wasn't just a side hustle? What if this was a career? But of course, the world around me had different ideas. Teachers asked where I planned to go to college. Friends talked about dorms and majors. Guidance counselors pushed applications and FAFSA forms. But none of it felt right. How was I supposed to commit to 4 years of classes and tuition I couldn't afford when I already had proof that I could create something and get paid for it? I remember telling my dad, sitting on our back porch under a sky full of stars, "I don't think college is for me. I want to work, build something real." He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. "Then build it better than they ever imagined." So I did. I started reading books on business and marketing from the public library. I devoured free YouTube tutorials on branding, sales funnels, customer psychology. While other kids were going to parties, I was sketching website wireframes and teaching myself Photoshop on a secondhand laptop. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but it was mine. Years later, when I founded Narrative Edge, everything I learned from those humble beginnings poured into my business. I didn't need an MBA to understand how to serve clients. I didn't need a degree to build relationships, solve problems, or deliver results. I had already done it, just on a smaller scale with cheaper beads and less polish. Today, when I sit across from CEOs and brand executives in my office in Austin, I often think back to that 15-year-old girl outside the stadium, hands frozen, face hopeful. She didn't know it yet, but she had already taken her first steps toward a $10 million future, and all it took was a $3 bracelet. They say chemistry is about reactions. Sometimes it's science, sometimes it's fate. I was 16 when I met Lucas Reynolds. Tall, polished, the kind of guy who wore Letterman jackets and didn't have to worry about his lunch account running dry. He was everything I wasn't. Confident, charismatic, and born into a life of polished floors and private tennis lessons. Me, I was the girl wearing thrifted jeans and carrying a knockoff backpack I patched up with duct tape. We met in chemistry class, assigned lab partners, randomly. I remember that first day vividly. My hands were stained with ink from a broken pen, and I just jogged to school because I'd missed the bus again. I was still catching my breath when the teacher read my name. Avery Bennett, you're with Lucas Reynolds. Great, I thought. Of course, the golden boy. I trudged over to the station, already bracing myself for the polite distance I was used to getting from kids like him. But instead, Lucas smiled, genuine, not forced, and said, "You're Avery, right? I've seen you selling those bracelets." "That's pretty cool." I blinked. Thanks, just a side hustle." "No, seriously. Most kids around here just ask their parents for money. You're out here earning it. That's impressive." That was the moment everything shifted. He didn't look at me like I was charity. He didn't pity me or act surprised that someone like me could run a business. He just respected it. Lucas and I were complete opposites in the lab. I was methodical, focused on precision. He was intuitive, experimenting with confidence and flair. But we balanced each other in a way that made sense. And not just on the periodic table, we talked about more than assignments. He asked me questions no one had ever cared to ask, about my family, my goals, my business ideas, and he listened, really listened. A few weeks in, he invited me to grab milkshakes at the diner, my mom's diner. I hesitated, embarrassed. "I should probably warn you," I said. "My mom might be working the counter." He grinned. "Even better, I love good diner food." That night, she ended up being our waitress. My face turned 10 shades of red, but Lucas? He stood up, shook her hand, and said, "Mrs. Bennett, you raised an entrepreneur. I think that's amazing." My mom beamed for the rest of her shift. From then on, things moved fast. We started dating, secretly at first. Not because we were hiding, but because it felt fragile, like something precious we didn't want to break with too many opinions. But Oak Ridge is small, word got around, and that's when the judgments began. Lucas came from the Heights, Lakeside Heights, the wealthy neighborhood that felt like a different planet. Gated homes, lawns that never had brown spots. His family's house looked like it belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. The first time I visited, I nearly turned around in the driveway. The Reynolds foyer had a chandelier. Their fridge had a touchscreen. Their dog had a sweater more expensive than my entire outfit. Vivian Reynolds, Lucas's mom, opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So," she said, eyeing me up and down, "you're the girl Lucas has been talking about." She didn't wait for an answer. "What does your father do again?" "He works at a machine plant in Midland," I said, trying to sound proud. "Oh," she replied, her tone dripping with condescension. "Isn't that nice?" Dinner was formal. Forks I didn't know how to use, conversations about art auctions and prep school admissions. I kept quiet. Smiled when appropriate, nodded more than I spoke. Lucas held my hand under the table the whole time. Later that night, I overheard her talking to Lucas in the kitchen. "She's sweet," Vivian said, "but she'll never fit into our world. A girl with no education has no future." I wanted to cry. But Lucas, he didn't let it go. "She's the most driven person I've ever met," he shot back. "Just because her path looks different doesn't mean she won't go farther than any of us." That's who he was. Even back then, he never tried to fix me. He never asked me to change. He just stood beside me, even when his own family didn't understand it. We made it through high school together, barely. When college applications rolled in, Lucas was accepted into Cornell. Full ride. Legacy admission through his father Jonathan, who was a well-known attorney in upstate New York. Me? I didn't even apply, not because I wasn't smart enough, but because I knew it wasn't for me. You could get scholarships, Lucas said, trying to convince me. You've got the grades. Maybe, I said, but that's not what I want. I want to work, build something. He didn't push. He just nodded and said, then I'll cheer you on every step of the way. We promised to make long-distance work. He'd go to Ithaca, I'd stay in Oak Ridge, he'd study economics and finance. I'd start my business for real this time. His mom called it foolish. She's wasting her potential, she told anyone who'd listen. Starting a business at 18 with no degree? That's not ambition, that's delusion. But Lucas believed in me. And when I look back now from my office in Austin, where I sit as CEO of a multi-million-dollar agency, I realize he wasn't just my boyfriend. He was my first investor, not in money, but in belief. Belief that I was enough, belief that I could build something out of nothing, belief that love doesn't need matching resumes to last. When you grow up with nothing, you expect judgment. You get used to the subtle side eyes at the grocery store when you use coupons. You learn to read the difference between a polite smile and a condescending one. But no amount of growing up tough in Oak Ridge prepared me for the cold precision of Vivian Reynolds. Lucas's mom didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw insults. She wielded disapproval like a scalpel, sharp, quiet, and meant to cut without leaving visible wounds. From the moment I stepped into the Reynolds world, I knew I didn't belong. Their house wasn't just big, it was curated. Every room looked like it had been ripped from a catalog. Crystal vases, white carpets, sculptures that probably cost more than our family car. Even their dog Winston, a Pomeranian with a pedigree and a paw therapist, looked at me like I didn't belong. Vivian greeted me with a perfect smile and a chilled glass of sparkling water. She offered it like a test. No one else was drinking it. "Do you like LaCroix, Avery?" she asked. "Or would you prefer something a bit more familiar?" Lucas shot her a look, but I smiled and said, "LaCroix is great. Grapefruit's my favorite." Vivian never said anything outright insulting. That wasn't her style. Instead, it was little jabs disguised as small talk. "So, Avery, remind me, what are your post-high school plans again?" "I'm starting a small business." "Oh, how entrepreneurial," she said, drawing out each syllable. "You know, Grace interned at an international design firm her freshman year. Connections are everything these days." Her favorite word was actually, as in, actually, we usually summer in the Hamptons. Actually, Lucas has been top of his class since kindergarten. Actually, I read an article saying self-taught businesses often collapse within the first year. Lucas's dad, Jonathan, was quieter. He had a warmth Vivian lacked. He didn't say much, but when he did, it was thoughtful. During one dinner, he leaned in and asked, "So, tell me more about your business idea. What problem are you solving?" He listened, took mental notes. That night, he even said, "I admire people who build something from scratch. I did it once. It's hard." But his admiration wasn't enough to balance Vivian's constant undercurrent of disapproval. Grace, Lucas's younger sister, was polite but distant. She mirrored her mom's coolness, maybe out of loyalty or maybe because she didn't know what to do with someone like me, someone who didn't fit her mold of brunches and ballet classes. Michael, the youngest Reynolds sibling, was a college freshman when I first met him. He didn't say much but offered a nod now and then that felt like, "Hey, I see you, hang in there." The worst moment came the summer before Lucas's senior year of college. He was home for a few weeks and we'd been invited to a charity gala hosted by one of Vivian's friends. I wasn't excited, I didn't own anything that would pass for gala attire, but Lucas was insistent. "You belong there as much as anyone," he told me. So I borrowed a dress, did my hair the best I could, walked into that ballroom with shaky confidence. Vivian introduced me to her circle with an icy kind of grace. "This is Avery," she said. Lucas's friend from high school. She runs a small online venture, jewelry, I believe. I actually focus on social media consulting now, I corrected gently. Helping local businesses grow their digital presence. Vivian blinked. Oh, well, that's lovely. It's so good that young women are finding creative ways to stay busy these days. I smiled through clenched teeth. That night, I caught her in a hallway speaking to one of her friends. She didn't know I was behind the door. She means well, Vivian said. But let's be honest, Lucas is destined for more. He needs someone who understands that world, not someone who makes bracelets in her basement. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked back into that gala, found Lucas, and danced like nothing had happened. But inside, I was burning. It wasn't just the insult, it was the realization that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. Not for her. My hard work didn't matter, my ideas didn't matter, because I didn't come with a polished pedigree and an Ivy League name. When Lucas proposed the year after graduation, I thought maybe things would change. That Vivian would see how serious we were, how committed we were to each other. But at our engagement party, hosted of course at the Reynolds estate, she made sure to let me know exactly where I stood. I always imagined Lucas ending up with someone established, she told one of her friends, just loud enough for me to hear. But young love is so impulsive, isn't it? Later that night, she pulled me aside near the bathroom. I hope you understand, she said, swirling her wine. How lucky you are. Not many girls from your background end up in a family like this. I looked her straight in the eye. I know exactly how lucky I am, I said. Lucky to have found someone who loves me for who I am, not where I came from. That was the first time I didn't just take her words. That was the first time I stood up, even if only with a sentence. Lucas never stopped defending me. Every time she made a snide comment, he shut it down. But even he couldn't fully undo years of conditioning, years of believing that family harmony was more important than confrontation. And so I kept showing up. I kept smiling. I kept letting it slide, because I loved him and I thought love meant enduring what came with him. I thought if I proved myself enough, maybe she'd see me differently. But some people don't want to see you rise. They want you to stay small, because your success threatens their comfort. I didn't know it then, but the cracks had already started forming. It was only a matter of time before everything broke wide open. There comes a moment in every young adult's life when the world expects you to choose a path. For most people in Oak Ridge, that path was narrow. Graduate, get a job, stay close to home, maybe get lucky and land a factory position with benefits. But I wanted more. Not more money, though Lord knows that would help. Not even more recognition. I wanted more control. More say in how my life would go. And for me, that didn't look like college. When senior year hit, the pressure around me exploded. Lucas had already been accepted into Cornell. His acceptance letter came in a heavy envelope, complete with gold trim and a handwritten note from the dean. Vivian Reynolds threw a party to celebrate, of course. Champagne, catered hors d'oeuvres, a custom cake that said Cornell bound. Meanwhile, I had made my decision quietly. No college applications, no FAFSA, no dreams of dorm life or degrees. When my guidance counselor asked about my plans, I said, I'm going to start a business. She blinked, as if I'd said I wanted to join the circus. But Avery, you have the grades, you could qualify for scholarships, maybe even a full ride. I know, I said. But it's not what I want. She tried to be supportive, but I could hear the pity in her voice when she said, well, if you change your mind, community college is always an option. My parents? They didn't argue. They knew me. They'd seen me spend nights at the kitchen table with sketch pads, business books, and budgeting spreadsheets. They believed in my work ethic. In my vision, my dad said, college isn't the only place to get smart. Lucas was more hesitant. You're brilliant, Avery, he said, taking my hands. You could do anything. You sure this is what you want? I nodded. I don't want to wait 4 years to start my life. I want to build now. To his credit, he respected that. He didn't pressure me, but I could see the unease in his eyes when his friends talked about internships and summer fellowships, while I talked about sourcing packaging on eBay and pitching local bakeries. His mother, however, had no intention of hiding her opinion. One Sunday, during a family brunch, Vivian turned to me and said sweetly, "Have you considered taking some night classes? Just something to give you a bit more foundation." I smiled. "I'm focused on growing my business right now." She sipped her mimosa. "Well, just remember, dear, ambition without education is like a car without a steering wheel." Lucas stepped in. "Mom, I'm just saying," she continued, never raising her voice, "some people are meant to start companies, others are meant to work for them." It stung. But I'd heard worse. I swallowed my pride and reminded myself, she didn't have to believe in me. I believed in me. And so did Lucas. While he packed for Cornell, I picked up shifts at 2 part-time jobs, retail by day, restaurant host at night. I lived off gas station coffee and packed my own lunches. Every dollar I made went into savings or equipment. I downloaded free marketing courses, watched TED Talks, and spent hours at the Oak Ridge Library using their public computers. By 22, while Lucas was writing his thesis, I was launching my first real venture, a social media marketing service for small businesses in Michigan. I called it Pulse Local. It was nothing fancy, just me, a secondhand laptop, and a website I built using a free WordPress template. But it was mine. My first clients were local shops, an auto repair garage, a florist, a mom-and-pop diner. I helped them build Instagram pages, created posts with actual stories behind their products, and taught them how to engage with customers online. The work was exhausting. Some days I'd go 16 hours without looking up. My office was the corner of my parents' garage, wedged between paint cans and lawn equipment. I used a folding table as my desk and a milk crate as a chair. But every time a client's page got more followers, or someone mentioned they saw a post I made, it felt like magic. Lucas visited whenever he could. He'd sit beside me on the garage floor, watching as I edited videos or scheduled posts. "You're building something," he said one night, brushing hair from my eyes. "That takes guts. I'm so damn proud of you." Those words kept me going when I lost my biggest client 3 months in, when my laptop crashed and wiped out 3 projects, when I bounced a check trying to order business cards, when I had to choose between renewing my domain name or paying my phone bill. There were nights I cried quietly so my parents wouldn't hear. Days. I wondered if Vivian was right, if I was just playing pretend in a world that didn't respect hustle without a degree. But I kept going, because somewhere deep inside I knew I was building a life, not just a company. When Lucas graduated, he came back home and proposed. We were 24, young, yes, but sure. The engagement party was another Reynolds production, perfectly curated, perfectly awkward. Vivian toasted our bright future, then turned to me with a saccharine smile and said, "I always imagined Lucas would marry someone more established. But young love, what can you do?" It was the same line she'd used at his Cornell party, only this time it wasn't just about me, it was about our future. Still, I smiled. I had bigger dreams to chase. We moved into a 1-bedroom apartment. Lucas started a corporate job at a finance firm. I converted our hallway closet into my new office. My desk barely fit, and the Wi-Fi lagged every time someone microwaved leftovers, but it was a step forward. That year was hard. We didn't go out, we skipped vacations. We thrifted furniture, but we laughed, we built, we dreamed. And every time someone asked, "So what do you do?" I looked them in the eye and said, "I run a business." Because I did. It wasn't big. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, and it was just the beginning. They don't warn you that sometimes your dreams will break your heart. When you're a scrappy kid from a working-class town, people romanticize your hustle. They love the idea of the girl who made it. But what they don't see, the part nobody posts about, is how brutal it can be when your first big leap lands you flat on your face. I was 25 when I hit my first real wall. Lucas and I had just gotten married. We were still living in our tiny one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Austin, scraping by on his entry-level salary and my barely surviving business. I had rebranded from Pulse Local to a more polished name, Bennett Creative Solutions. I built a clean website, invested in branding, even printed glossy brochures. But looks don't pay the bills. Clients do, and I was losing them. My biggest client, a regional bakery chain, decided to hire a more experienced agency. They didn't say it outright, but I knew what they meant. A team with degrees, with an office, with suits. I remember hanging up that call, sitting at my kitchen table with a lukewarm cup of coffee and thinking, maybe this was a mistake. A week later, my computer crashed. Not a glitch. A full meltdown. Everything was gone. Client files, invoice templates, social media calendars, everything. I hadn't backed anything up. Replacing the computer emptied our emergency fund. I was humiliated. I'd built this dream on duct tape and determination, but it was collapsing like a house of cards. I broke down one night after dinner, sitting on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub. Lucas found me there. Mascara smeared, bills scattered, self-doubt spilling out of me like a flood. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," I whispered. "Maybe your mom was right." Lucas knelt beside me. "Hey, don't give her that power. She said I'd fail. She said I had no future without a degree. And look at me, Lucas, 2 businesses in and I'm sinking." He wrapped me in his arms and said words I'll never forget. Every person who ever built something worthwhile had a moment like this. This is just your storm. It doesn't mean you stop sailing. I didn't sleep much that night, but I woke up with fire in my chest. I decided to pivot. I took a step back and asked myself, what was I actually good at? Not just okay at, but great at. The answer surprised me. Storytelling. When I thought about the posts that had worked, the campaigns that caught traction, they weren't the ones with polished graphics or fancy hashtags. They were the ones that told a story, a human one, the ones that connected. Like the Valentine's Day post I did for a florist, featuring a 72-year-old customer who bought flowers for the wife he'd lost 5 years ago. Or the bakery that let me tell the story of how their founder learned to bake during chemo. Those posts, they exploded. Because they were real. That was the seed of Narrative Edge. I didn't need to be the biggest agency. I didn't need to offer everything. I needed to specialize, to be the best at one thing, helping small businesses find their voice and tell stories that built emotional bridges to their audience. So I rebranded, again. Narrative Edge was born in our apartment's second closet, literally. We had turned the walk-in into my new workspace. Lucas called it the think tank, even though it barely fit a chair and a folding table. I emailed every old client, every friend, every coffee shop owner I knew. I offered free consultations just to get my foot back in the door. One friend, a fellow Oak Ridge native who had opened a bakery in San Antonio, took a chance on me. She said, "I don't know if this will work, but we're desperate. We need more foot traffic." I dove in. I spent hours interviewing her, learning her backstory, understanding what made her recipes unique. Then I crafted a social campaign that shared those stories, one post at a time. Within a month, her sales doubled, not because of gimmicks, because people connected. Word spread. I picked up 2 more clients by referral, then 5. Lucas would come home to find me still in sweatpants at 7 p.m., eyes glued to the screen, pizza crust forgotten on a paper plate. "Baby," he'd laugh, "you haven't moved in hours." "Because I'm building something," I'd whisper back. I worked harder than I ever had. I took online courses in consumer psychology, digital storytelling, platform algorithms. I stayed up reading until 2 a.m., then woke at 6 to pitch new prospects. I poured every lesson from my failures into this next phase. I stopped trying to be like the agencies I couldn't compete with. Instead, I became something they couldn't replicate: personal, gritty, emotionally intelligent. 6 months in, I landed my first big client since the crash, a regional chain of fitness centers. They were struggling to keep up with national competitors. My pitch? Let's stop selling gym memberships and start telling transformation stories. We launched a campaign featuring real members, before and after photos, interviews, struggles, wins, the human side of wellness. Within 3 months, their membership increased 30%. When I showed the numbers to Lucas, he nearly dropped his coffee. "Avery, this is real. This is working." That moment, it wasn't just validation, it was redemption. One night, over dinner at the Reynolds house, I tried to share this win. I thought maybe, just maybe, Vivian would soften. I showed her the fitness campaign results, hoping for a sliver of recognition. She glanced at the numbers and said, "It's nice they're giving you a chance, just be sure you're charging properly." Small businesses love paying in exposure. I clenched my fork, took a deep breath. "Actually," I said calmly, "they signed a 6-figure contract for the year." Up front. Silence. "Well," she muttered, "let's see if they renew." They did, and they referred me to 3 more. By the end of that year, I had 7 major clients, real revenue, and for the first time, profit. Lucas celebrated every win, champagne for every contract. Sticky notes on my laptop that read, "You're killing it. CEO energy. Told you you'd rise." I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building, not despite the failures, but because of them. Success doesn't arrive with a fanfare. There's no parade, no fireworks, no instant moment where you wake up and feel like you finally made it. Most of the time, it sneaks up on you, disguised as exhaustion, quiet victories, and one more email that changes everything. By the time I turned 27, Narrative Edge was no longer just me in a closet with a folding chair. We had a real office, well, a tiny space above a dentist's office downtown, but it had windows and desks and a door with our name on it. That door meant something. I had 3 full-time employees: Cam, our content strategist; Lena, a brilliant copywriter from El Paso who could turn a dry brand story into poetry; and Jordan, my right-hand assistant and the most organized human I've ever met. We worked 10-hour days, fueled by bad coffee and big dreams. Our approach was simple but powerful: authentic storytelling for brands that wanted to connect on a human level. While traditional marketing firms chased metrics, we chased meaning. We asked clients, "Why did you start this business? What's the story behind your logo, your location, your favorite product?" People responded. Our campaigns weren't about perfection, they were about people. And that made all the difference. One of our breakthrough clients was a Midwest-based home renovation company. They'd plateaued for years, struggling to stand out in a sea of glossy before and after ads. Our solution? We told the stories of the families who lived in those homes. A single mom who saved for 7 years to build a kitchen she could bake in with her kids. A retired veteran who finally remodeled the home he bought in 1975. We paired visuals with emotion, and the results were explosive. Revenue jumped. Engagement skyrocketed. Their CEO called me crying when their Google reviews doubled in 60 days. "You made people care," he said. "No one's done that for us before." That's when I knew we were onto something bigger than just content. Meanwhile, back at home, Lucas was thriving in his corporate job, but he was also watching me grow with this quiet mixture of awe and disbelief. He came to every team happy hour, asked questions about our clients, helped me proof decks at midnight. One night, I showed him our quarterly revenue breakdown. His eyes widened. "Wait," he said, scrolling through the numbers. You made more this quarter than I did all year. I nodded slowly. Yeah, it kind of snuck up on me. He stood, walked to the kitchen, pulled out the good bottle of champagne we'd been saving since our wedding, and popped it. To my wife, he said, holding his glass high. Who built a damn empire from a folding table and a busted laptop? That toast meant more to me than any award ever could. We bought our first home that fall, a 4-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood just outside of downtown. It wasn't Lakeside Heights, but it was ours. We picked the paint colors, installed the porch light ourselves, hosted movie nights with secondhand couches and handmade snacks. Vivian, of course, had thoughts. When she walked through our new home at the housewarming party, she looked around and said, "It's quaint, a good starter home." I smiled. Actually, we love this neighborhood. We plan to be here a while. My parents brought homemade food and helped hang curtains. The Reynolds arrived precisely on time, carrying an expensive flower arrangement and a bottle of wine I couldn't pronounce. The contrast was sharp, but I no longer felt small in their presence, because I had built something no one could take away from me. As narrative edge grew, so did the pressure. We took on more clients, hired more staff, moved into a bigger office with real conference rooms and exposed brick walls. Suddenly, I was running strategy meetings, negotiating contracts, overseeing creative reviews, and still writing content late into the night. It was exhausting, but it was exhilarating. One day I got an email from a senior editor at Marketing Innovator Weekly. They'd heard about our campaigns and wanted to feature us in their Founders to Watch issue. I reread the email 5 times, convinced it was a scam. When the issue came out, there I was, on page 14, beneath a photo of me in jeans and sneakers, standing in front of our office mural. From Oak Ridge to CEO, How Avery Bennett Built a Storytelling Powerhouse. I framed it, not for my office, for my parents' living room. Because that wasn't just my win. That was every missed vacation, every sleepless night, every sacrifice they made so I could dream beyond our zip code. The article got shared. A lot. That's how we landed our first national brand. A wellness company out of California reached out and asked, "Can you do what you did for that gym chain, but for us on a national scale?" It was a stretch. We'd never operated beyond the Midwest, but I looked at my team and said, "Let's take the leap." And we did. That campaign became our golden ticket. It opened doors, introduced us to investors, scaled our reach faster than I ever imagined. We built out departments, streamlined processes, created systems. I even hired a CFO because, to be honest, numbers at that scale scared the hell out of me. At 30, we hit our first $10 million valuation. I found out while eating takeout on my office floor. My team burst into applause. Jordan cried. Cam fist pumped. Lena brought out a cake she'd hidden in the break room fridge with 10 Mil Club written in bright pink icing. Lucas picked me up that night, kissed my forehead, and said, "You did it, babe." "No," I told him. "We did it. You stood beside me when it was just me, a dream, and a laptop that could barely open Chrome." That night, I didn't fall asleep worrying about bills or client retention. I fell asleep thinking about what came next. Because success wasn't the finish line. It was just the next beginning. There's something strange that happens when the girl they once dismissed becomes the woman they depend on. By the time Narrative Edge crossed the $10 million valuation, I thought maybe, just maybe, Vivian Reynolds would finally see me differently. Not with warmth necessarily, but at least with respect. I was wrong. But what did begin to change was everything else. It started with Grace. Lucas's younger sister had always been polite to me. Not warm, not rude, just distant. She went to an expensive private university out of state and graduated with a degree in art history, which, even in her own words, didn't exactly make the job offers flood in. She came over one Sunday afternoon for dinner, just her, no parents. I could tell something was off. Her smile was shaky and her eyes kept darting to the floor. After dessert, she asked to talk. Just the two of us. "I messed up," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have $63,000 in student loans, rent's due, and I just got laid off." I could hear the humiliation in her voice. It was the same sound I had made years ago, crying on the bathroom floor after losing my first client. So I did what I wish someone had done for me. "I can cover your loans for a year," I said, without hesitation. "That'll buy you time to breathe, and if you're open to it, I'll help you find a skill that's more in demand, maybe something adjacent to what you already love." Her eyes welled up instantly. "You do that?" "Yes," I said. "Your family." Vivian didn't like it. When she found out, she called Lucas. "Not me." "She doesn't need charity," Vivian snapped. Lucas, to his credit, didn't back down. "It's not charity, Mom. It's compassion. And it's what Avery and I choose to do with our success." I helped Grace enroll in a digital design certification program. Taught her how to build a portfolio, got her in touch with a few design agencies that partnered with Narrative Edge. Within 4 months, she landed a full-time remote job with benefits and stability. She texted me the day she got the offer. "You changed my life." That was the beginning. Then came Michael. Lucas's youngest brother was always the quiet one, the kind of guy who observes more than he speaks. He was in his late 20s when he got diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder that required a specialized treatment his insurance barely touched. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need details. We paid the bill, nearly $50,000. Michael tried to protest, but I cut him off with the same words I'd said to Grace. Family helps family, no strings. After that, something shifted. Not with Vivian, no, she held on to her bitterness like it was fine china. But with everyone else. Jonathan, Lucas's father, started pulling me aside during family gatherings to ask about business strategy. Grace began inviting me to girls' nights. Michael would call just to catch up, something he'd never done before. Even the extended family noticed. At Thanksgiving, one of Lucas's aunts leaned in and said, "You know, Avery, I always knew you had it in you. You've got backbone and brains." I smiled politely, knowing full well she hadn't said a word to me for the first 3 years Lucas and I were together. But I wasn't looking for apologies. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. Still, the tension with Vivian grew. As my influence rose, so did her discomfort. At family dinners, she'd make comments like, "Well, it's amazing what people can achieve without formal education these days," or, "Not everyone needs a college degree, some just get lucky on Instagram." Lucas would intervene. Jonathan would try to redirect the conversation, but her tone never softened. And yet, she never refused the help. When their Aspen vacation home needed remodeling during an economic downturn, Lucas came to me one night and said, "Dad's worried. They can't cover the renovations, and Mom doesn't want anyone to know." So we paid for it. Quietly, no announcement, just a silent transaction that made the project possible. It was around then I discovered we were also covering their country club membership. Lucas had set up the payments from our joint account years ago when his dad hinted they were going to cancel due to finances. "You didn't tell me?" I asked him one night, not angry, just stunned. He shrugged, guilty. "I didn't think it mattered. They were struggling, and it wasn't a huge amount." Mom would have been mortified. I looked at him hard. The same mom who calls my business a hobby and questions my character every holiday dinner? "She's from a different generation," he said weakly. "She doesn't mean it." "Yes, she does," I replied quietly. "She absolutely does." That's when the resentment crept in. Not because I wanted credit, but because I wanted dignity. I was funding this family in silence while being insulted to my face, and the only person who truly saw it was Lucas. He started speaking up more. He'd correct her mid-sentence, redirect sharp comments, praised me in front of her every chance he got. I could see the conflict in him, his loyalty torn between the woman who raised him and the woman he built a life with. The balance of power had shifted, and Vivian hated it, because I was no longer the outsider. I was the one paying the bills, offering the solutions, lifting her children when she couldn't. And the truth was, nothing threatened a person like that more than realizing they no longer held control. It wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that I had become undeniable. I didn't know that evening would be the breaking point. I didn't know it would be the night everything cracked open, raw and undeniable. All I knew was I had this dull, familiar knot in my stomach as Lucas and I pulled into the circular driveway of the Reynolds estate, just like every other Sunday dinner. Only this one was different. This time it was supposed to be a celebration. Grace had just landed a position at a prestigious design firm in Chicago, something she earned with the skills she built through the program I paid for, the references I helped her collect, the portfolio I personally reviewed. But none of that mattered to Vivian. I wore my favorite navy blue wrap dress that night, tasteful, professional, nothing flashy. The pearl earrings Lucas gave me on our 3rd anniversary, a touch of mascara, and the softest lip gloss I owned. I looked like someone you'd take seriously, because part of me still, somehow, wanted to be taken seriously by her. "Try to enjoy it," Lucas said gently as we parked. "It's about Grace tonight," I nodded, but something in my chest tightened. Vivian greeted us at the door with a half-full glass of wine already in her hand. Her cheeks were flushed and her smile was as brittle as ever. "Darling," she cooed, hugging Lucas. "Everyone's in the living room." Grace is glowing. She didn't even look at me. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Grace was radiant, laughing and gracious, giving credit where it was due, even to me. "I couldn't have done it without Avery," she said, smiling across the table. "She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." That should have been the moment Vivian joined in, said something like, "Yes, Avery helped so much." Even a nod would have sufficed. Instead, she took another long sip of wine and said, "Well, she certainly has money to throw around." The room fell silent for a second too long. Jonathan cleared his throat. Lucas shifted in his seat. I forced a smile. "It wasn't about money, Vivian. I wanted to help Grace build something she was proud of." Vivian raised her glass slightly, eyes narrowing. "Of course you did, though I'm sure her natural talent would have taken her there eventually." Her tone was light, but her meaning wasn't. The tension crackled. The main course arrived. People tried to shift the conversation. Lucas mentioned that Narrative Edge was expanding to Chicago, that our team was opening a regional office downtown. Vivian's smile tightened. "How nice. Though I wonder if all this business travel is healthy for a marriage." Lucas's hand clenched his fork. "Mom, I just mean," she continued, as if unaware of the sharpness in her voice, "don't you miss having a wife who's actually home?" Grace jumped in. "Avery's building an empire, Mom." Vivian shrugged. "Yes, well, some of us value a more traditional role for women." Jonathan spoke up for the first time. "The business world's changed, Vivian. Avery's success is impressive by any standard." Vivian smiled. But it was the kind of smile you wear before drawing blood. Then dessert arrived, and that's when she snapped. We were mid-conversation about future plans, Lucas excitedly mentioning our potential expansion to the West Coast, when Vivian, now visibly drunk, leaned back and said, loud enough for the entire table, "You know, Lucas, I always thought you'd marry someone with a degree, someone with elegance, a real future. Not uneducated trash." No one moved, no one breathed. Lucas stood so fast his chair tipped backward. "Mom," he said, his voice ice, "you apologize. Right now. She didn't—" She raised her chin instead, wine sloshing slightly over the rim of her glass. "Why don't you both just leave?" she said sharply. "We were better off before she came along. With her money and her influence, she's turned you all into dependents. She's not family." She's a disruption. I sat still, back straight, breathing steady. And for the first time in 7 years, I didn't try to keep the peace. I didn't try to prove my worth. I didn't try to smile and make the discomfort go away for everyone else. Instead, I stood. I placed my napkin neatly on the table and I said, "Thank you for your honesty, Vivian. After all these years, it's refreshing to finally hear how you really feel." Lucas reached for my hand. "We'll go." But I shook my head. "No. You stay. This is between you and your family now. I'll see you at home." Then I walked out. Out of that house, out of years of silent swallowing, grace-forced dinners, and Sunday nights that left me emotionally bruised. The Uber ride home was quiet. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared out the window at the city lights and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. When I got home, I changed into sweatpants, made a cup of tea, and sat on the patio alone. The silence wasn't lonely, it was sacred. It was mine. Lucas came home hours later. His face was pale, his voice raw. "She didn't apologize," he admitted. "She said she'd had too much wine, that she didn't mean it." I laughed, not out of amusement, but exhaustion. "Of course she meant it," I said. "She's always meant it. She just finally said it out loud." He looked broken. "What happens now?" I looked up at the stars, then at the man I loved. "I need space. I'm going to Hawaii for a while." "Alone." "I'll come with you," he said quickly. I shook my head. "I need to think." About us. About what I'm willing to continue accepting in my life. And for the first time, he didn't try to change my mind. He just said, "I love you." And I said, "I know." But that's not the issue. Because love means nothing if it lives in a house full of hurt. That dinner broke something in me, but not in the way Vivian intended. It broke the last thread of obligation I felt to keep pretending. And that was the beginning of my freedom. There's something about the sound of waves that quiets even the loudest thoughts. The morning after that dinner, I booked a one-way flight to Kauai. No itinerary, no return date, just a duffel bag, my laptop, and a gut-deep need to breathe without holding my chest in. Lucas helped me pack. He didn't argue, he didn't beg. He just folded my favorite sweatshirt, tucked it into the side pocket, and said, "Text me when you land." When the plane took off, I stared out the window as the Texas skyline faded beneath the clouds, and I felt weightless, not free yet, but lighter. When I stepped into our beachfront home in Kauai, a place we'd bought but never truly lived in, it felt like the air itself welcomed me, warm, unscripted, and honest. There were no dinner parties, no side eyes, no expectations, just sunlight, salt water, and silence. I turned off my phone the first 3 days. No notifications, no calendar. No crisis emails. I woke with the sun and walked barefoot across the sand. I swam in the ocean until my fingers wrinkled. I ate grilled pineapple and drank iced coffee on the lanai, watching sea turtles bob in the surf. And slowly, something inside me began to unclench. On day 4, I opened my laptop. Not for work, but for clarity. I wrote, not for clients, not for the company, not for anyone else. Just for me. What did I want? Not 5 years from now. Not someday. Now, I wanted peace. Not just quiet surroundings, but emotional stillness. A life where I wasn't constantly anticipating judgment. A life where love wasn't conditional upon how well I navigated someone else's landmines. Lucas called that night. "I miss you," he said, and I talked to her. I told her I wouldn't tolerate the way she spoke to you ever again. I stayed silent for a moment. Did she apologize? He hesitated. She said she was embarrassed, that she didn't mean it. I exhaled. "Lucas, that's not an apology. That's image control." He sighed. I know, I'm trying. I just want you to come home. I'm not ready, I said. And I don't know if that's home anymore. There was a long pause. You're thinking about staying there? He asked. I'm thinking about what life would feel like if I stopped bending to survive it. The truth is, I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. Tired of trying to win over someone who never wanted to be won. Tired of being the bigger person while she stayed small. Tired of letting my success be something I had to downplay to preserve someone else's comfort. Over the next 2 weeks, Lucas called nightly. At first, to check-ins. Then to push gently. The Westfield pitch is next week. The team could really use your energy. Or, Grace keeps asking when you're coming back. I kept it brief. The team can handle Westfield. I'm not ready. Eventually, his tone shifted. She wants to have dinner, he said on day 12, to clear the air. No. Avery, at some point we have to move forward. I laughed bitterly. We're not a family, Lucas. We're a married couple that visits your family. There's a difference. He didn't like that. But he didn't argue. The space between us stretched. Grace called me next. How are you? She asked, with a tone that was actually caring. Better, I admitted. Clearer. She sighed. Things here are tense. Dad's not speaking to Mom. Michael's furious. Everyone knows she crossed a line, but you didn't cause this. She did. Her voice softened. Ethan said you might be staying in Hawaii long term. I'm thinking about it, I said truthfully. You deserve peace, Avery, but I hope whatever you decide, it's for you. Not out of spite, not because of her. That landed. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was choosing me, and I needed to know if Lucas could do the same. When he showed up at my door on day 24, suitcase in hand, I wasn't surprised. He didn't warn me, just arrived. I couldn't go another day without seeing you, he said. I stepped aside, let him in. We sat on the lanai, the sound of waves filling the silence between us. I thought we'd come back together, he said finally. But now, I don't know if we're still walking the same road. I don't either, I said softly, and that's why I needed space. He nodded, eyes rimmed with red. Over the next few days, we moved gently, like two people rediscovering one another in a world with new rules. We cooked. We walked, we laughed carefully, and we talked. Deep, real conversations, no edits, no pretense. I realized something, he told me one night as we watched the sunset. I've spent my whole life protecting my mom's feelings, even when she was wrong. Even when it hurt you. I nodded, letting the truth settle. She called again, he added. She offered a kind of apology. What kind? She said, I suppose I owe her an apology. I raised an eyebrow. Exactly, he said. He finally saw it. The pattern, the manipulation, the emotional gymnastics. He reached for my hand. I'm sorry it took this long. I leaned my head on his shoulder. It's not too late, but it has to change. Not just words, actions. That night we made a decision. We wouldn't go back to Austin, not full-time. We'd make Hawaii home, for now, maybe longer. Narrative Edge could run remotely. We had a solid executive team, the clients would adapt, and maybe, just maybe, we could build a version of our life that felt honest, peaceful, real. The next day, we signed the paperwork to open a West Coast satellite branch, run from Kauai with periodic travel to the mainland. Lucas officially joined Narrative Edge as COO. He smiled at me from across our shared desk. Full circle, huh? From Chem Lab to co-founders, I said with a grin. The best part? For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was running towards something new. Something mine. Starting over isn't always about leaving everything behind. Sometimes it's about drawing a new line, firm, clear, and rooted in self-respect. and deciding who, if anyone, gets to cross it. In Hawaii, Lucas and I began to rebuild, not just our marriage, but our understanding of what partnership really meant. We worked side by side in our Ocean View home office. Mornings were quiet strategy meetings over Kona coffee. Afternoons were client calls and campaign brainstorms. Evenings we cooked together, barefoot, windows open, music on low. It was simple, intentional, healing. We finally felt like a team, without all the noise, but silence didn't mean avoidance. We talked, deep, sometimes painful conversations about the years I had spent absorbing his mother's disapproval, the way he had often chosen neutrality when I needed protection. Lucas didn't deflect. He owned it. "I thought keeping the peace was love," he said. "But peace that hurts you isn't peace at all." He started therapy. Joined our couples sessions without hesitation. He unpacked decades of patterns, being the fixer, the golden child, the silent buffer between Vivian and the rest of the world. For the first time, he understood that love meant taking a stand, even if it meant shaking the foundation he was raised on. Then came the call. Vivian. She asked to speak to me directly. "I suppose I owe you an apology," she said flatly. "I was upset. You've taken Lucas away from his family." I didn't flinch. "Lucas is still your son, but we're building a life on different terms now." There was silence. Then, reluctantly, she asked, "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," I said. "I don't need anything from you, but if you want a relationship with your son, it has to include mutual respect for both of us." We ended the call with no tears, no closure, just a quiet shift. For the first time, I wasn't trying to fit into their world. I was creating mine, and if they wanted to be part of it, the door was open, but only if they knocked respectfully. If there's one thing life has taught me, it's this. Respect is not something you beg for. It's something you require. For years, I believed that if I just worked hard enough, smiled long enough, achieved loudly enough, I could earn the approval of people who quietly disapproved of my existence. I bent myself into smaller and smaller shapes, hoping to be palatable, respectable, acceptable, but the truth, some people will never clap for you, especially when your success reminds them of everything they didn't earn or everything they feared. And that's okay. Because validation doesn't build peace, boundaries do. Real love, real partnership, real community, they don't come with strings or conditions. They don't ask you to stay silent in the face of cruelty or to compromise your worth for someone else's comfort. When I stopped trying to fit into rooms that were never built for me, I finally built a home where I could breathe, where I could dream, where I could grow without apology. And the people who truly loved me, they came with me. That's the lesson. You are allowed to outgrow disrespect. You are allowed to choose peace over performance. You're allowed to walk away, even from family, if it means walking toward yourself. So don't wait for permission to take up space. You've already earned your seat at the table, and if the table doesn't honor you, build a better one. On a beach, in a boardroom, or right where you stand. Because you, yes, you, are more than enough. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below and let's build a space where self-worth comes first. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the reminder. Your voice matters.